She came into my office, had on a beautiful jacket, and everything about her said, this woman has it together. She's vice president of her company, two children, doing well, active in her church, the kind of person other people go to for advice. And about 20 minutes in, she got very quiet and she said, "Can I tell you the truth?" She said, "I'm terrified somebody is going to find out." So I asked her, of course, find out what? And she said, that I don't belong here, that I've fooled all of them. What would they think of me if they knew what I'm really like? So I asked her the obvious question. I said, "All right, what are you really like?" She didn't hesitate, not for a second. She had that answer ready, the way you have your own phone number ready. And she said, "Awful. I'm a failure." I'll just sit with that for a minute. She's sitting in front of me, a woman with a life most people would trade anything for. And her honest, private, unrehearsed assessment of herself was two words: awful and failure. That distance between what everyone else could plainly see and what she believed in her bones. That's what I want to talk to you about today. I'm Dr. Bev Smallwood. I'm a licensed psychologist, and I've spent more than 40 years listening to people describe themselves. And I want to be careful right here because I know where you expect this to go. You expect me to tell you that you are wonderful. I'm not going to do that because in 4 decades, I've never once helped a single human being by telling them they were wonderful. But if you believe you're awful, a compliment doesn't even land as encouragement. It lands as evidence that I've somehow been fooled as well. So let's do something more useful than a pep talk. Because what that woman had was not a feeling, it was a verdict. She'd held a trial about her own worth, and she had rendered a judgment that she was living every single day inside the sentence. And when I looked at how that trial had been conducted, I found what I almost always find: the courtroom was rigged. The law she was being judged under was impossible for anybody to keep. And the witnesses against her had been coached 30 years ago by people who should never have been allowed to testify. And the judge, who was her, was only admitting evidence from one side. So there are three problems. Let's take them one at a time. And after each one, I'm going to tell you exactly what to do about it because I don't want you to leave here with an insight and no instructions. Here's the first cause: the standard is impossible. Here's something most people have never had explained to them, and it changes everything after you see it. Your opinion of yourself is not a measure of how you're doing. It's a measure of the distance between how you're doing and how you believed you should do. So that's a gap, and that's all it is. And that means two people can perform identically and walk away with completely different opinions of themselves because they were measuring from different lines. That's why the woman in the beautiful jacket felt like a fraud. She wasn't underperforming. She was actually performing at a very high level, but she was against a standard that no living person could reach. At a wide gap held long enough doesn't read to you as I aimed high. It reads as I'm not enough. Now, there are only two ways to close a gap. You can raise the performance or you can correct the expectation. And you've been trying to close it for 30 years by running faster. And it's never once occurred to you that the finish line might be drawn in the wrong place. So here's what to do about it. 3 things. And the first one takes 10 seconds. Run the friend test. Take the standard you're holding yourself to and ask, would I hold my daughter to this, or my best friend, or anybody I love? Well, if the answer is no, and it almost always is no, then what you have is not a standard, it's a weapon. And you're the only person you pointed at. The second thing to do is define done before you begin. So you write down in advance what good enough looks like for this task. And in advance, because if you wait until afterward, you'll move the line. So do it in advance. Perfectionists, y'all, always move the line. And that's not an accident. It's a goalpost you can move, and that goalpost you can never reach. The third thing to do is grade the performance, not the person. There's real surgery in this one sentence. I handle that badly. That's a review. I am awful. That's an identity. The first one gives you something to work on Monday. The second one gives you nothing to do but just feel bad. So catch yourself converting a bad afternoon into a permanent fact about who you are. Now, let me draw a line here because people hear this and they worry that I'm telling them to lower their standards. Well, I'm not really. High standards are about the work. Perfectionism is about your worth. High standards let you finish something and feel good about it. Perfectionism never lets you finish at all. So here's the second cause for those feelings that you're not enough, and it's the old voices. Nobody arrives at I'm a failure on their own. That is learned language. Somebody taught it to you. And usually they taught it early and they taught it often. Now, some of you were raised on a steady diet of criticism. It wasn't just one terrible incident, it was a daily diet. A father who noticed that one bee, a mother who commented on your weight every time you walked in the door, a teacher or a coach or an older sibling, a first husband, somebody whose approval you needed, but you could never quite earn. And here's what you have to understand about a child. A child can't consider the source. A child doesn't think, well, dad is under a great deal of financial pressure and he speaks to everyone that way. No, a child thinks something much simpler and more permanent. The child thinks, I must be what he says I am. So you filed it and you grew up and you moved away. And maybe that person's been gone from your life for 20 years, and maybe they've even been dead for 10 years. But their voice stayed. And this is the cruelest part of it. After enough years, it stops sounding like them and it starts sounding like you. So you can no longer tell yourself that you're quoting somebody. You think you're just seeing yourself clearly. So here's what to do about it. Name whose voice it is. The next time that sentence shows up in your head, stop and ask, said this to me first, and then say it out loud. That's my mother's voice. The moment a thought has an owner, it stops being a fact and becomes an opinion, and opinions can be evaluated. Also, consider the source now that you're old enough to. Would you let that person manage your retirement account? Would you let them perform your surgery? Would you take marriage advice from them? And if the answer is no, then why on earth do they still get to define who you are? You outgrew their advice on everything else. So now answer it. Don't argue with it and don't try to win. You can't win an argument with a memory. Just have one prepared sentence and use it every time. That was his frustration, not my failure. I'm not that little girl, and this is not that house. Same sentence every time. Repetition is how it got in, and repetition is how it comes out. So put new voices in the room on purpose, because most of us drift toward what feels familiar. And if criticism is what's familiar, you'll find your way to critical people and you'll think it's normal. So go be around at least one person who sees you accurately and says so out loud. And for those of you who share my faith, let me put it plainly. You have two reports about who you are. One was written by a person who was tired and angry and didn't know what they were doing. The other was written by the one who made you on purpose and has never once been mistaken about anything. So you get to choose which report you believe. Choose the accurate one. And the third cause I want to talk about is the habit of looking for what's wrong. It's not just about your past or your standards. It's about your habit of attention. Your mind works something like a searchlight. It doesn't illuminate the whole field. It just lights up what you pointed at, and everything else stays dark. And most of us, we're not neutral about where we point it. Now, some of you have been trained by temperament or maybe by profession or by a hard life to scan for what's wrong. And you're excellent at it. You walk into a room and you see the crooked picture. You proofread a page and the typo jumps out at you like it's on fire. Okay, that's a useful skill. But the trouble is that you can't aim it at the world and exempt yourself. You turn that same searchlight inward and it finds exactly what it was trained to find. Every flaw, every mistake, every awkward thing you said in 1998. And then, because the light's only on the flaws, you look at it, you look at what you see, and you conclude accurately that that's what's there. Well, there's a problem with that. There's one more piece of it. It's the engine underneath. It's that imposter syndrome specifically. You're comparing your inside to everybody else's outside. And you know every doubt you ever had, every morning you didn't want to get up, every time you faked confidence in a meeting. And then, of course, you know only what they let you see. Hey, that's really not a fair comparison. That's entirely different categories of information. So here's what to do about it. Keep an evidence log for 2 weeks. Just write down 3 things a day that you did well. Little bitty things count. You were patient with a slow cashier. You finished one hard email. You didn't say the thing you wanted to say. Hey, this is not the same as gratitude journaling, and it's not positive thinking. It's evidence collection. You can't argue your way out of a verdict. You have to out evidence it. So now ask a better question. What's wrong with me is a search command, and your brain will fill that order every single time. But replace that with what's actually true here. That question focuses the light across the whole field instead of just one little corner of it. And as we've said in an earlier video, watch where you put that but, because whatever follows but is what you keep. I've come a long way, but I blew it Thursday, leaves you with Thursday. I blew it Thursday, but I've come a long way, leaves you with the long way. Same two facts, completely different verdict. So rearranging that sentence is the cheapest correction on this entire list. So let me finish that story about the woman in the beautiful jacket. She didn't wake up one morning believing she was wonderful. That's not what changed, and I wouldn't have believed it if it had. What changed is that she stopped answering the question, what am I really like, with a verdict, and she started answering it with a description. Instead of, I'm a failure, she could finally say something like, I'm a capable woman who is hard on herself, who was raised by a man who didn't know how to praise anybody, and who's learning to tell the difference between a bad afternoon and a bad person. Okay, that's longer. It's less dramatic. And guess what? It's true. So I want to say one more thing before we finish. It's if what I've described today is not just an occasional voice for you, but a constant one, if it's affecting how you sleep or eat or whether you want to keep going, please don't try to outthink it by yourself. Talk to somebody, a counselor, your doctor, your pastor. It's not bravery to carry that alone. And there's no shame in telling somebody and setting it down. If this video was helpful to you, subscribe to the channel. I put out new videos on healing, coping, purpose, and leadership, practical things you can use in a hard week. And I want you to know about something coming I'm excited about. My new book releases in just a couple of months. It's called All the Rage: How to Deal with Angry People Without Becoming One Yourself. So that book is about the angry people around you, but I'll tell you something I've learned. For a great many people, the harshest, most relentless critic they'll ever have to deal with is not in the next office or across the dinner table. It's the one doing the talking inside their own head. And that same steadiness that allows you to stand in front of a critical person without coming apart is exactly what lets you stand in front of a critical thought. So watch for it. I'll tell you more about the book as we get a little closer. In the meantime, here's what I want you to take with you. You're not a bad person who's been fooling everybody. You're a real person who's been judging yourself with a broken ruler. So go get a better one. And so in the meantime, until we meet again, I want you to keep going, keep growing, and you'll come out stronger on the other side. I'll see you in the next video.